Hi, it's Richard, the founder of Conscious Marketer, and I'm joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hello.
And today we are so excited to be introducing you to George Kao. He is a authentic business coach who advocates for integrity and compassion in marketing instead of predatory tactics we've all experienced as consumers. He's published 4 books. I'm very jealous of that or envious of that because I still haven't published my first. But Principles of Authentic Marketing Content. Third is Joyful Productivity, and also Authentic Selling. And George had us on his podcast a while back, and it was like we had this huge connection. It was like soul family. So today he's going to be talking to us about marketing as a way to find and refine your calling and purpose. Hi, George. Welcome here today.
Thanks, Richard and Kylie. It's so good to be with you. And yes, soul family. Here we go.
Well, we normally start by kind of wanting to know your backstory because it's always interesting how people get to where they get. And I'm kind of curious as to how you came to define yourself as an authentic business coach and how you moved into your calling.
Yeah, thanks. No, and that's a great question. And I'll share the backstory in a way that hopefully has some lessons that folks can take away. I was, I quit a job in late 2008, probably the worst timing. I could have kept going with that job, but I quit because it wasn't quite the right fit. And I couldn't find a job for, 3 months, 4 months. And finally, I just started, within that time, I started to kind of help my friends with social media. Because back then I was I'm still into it. And my friends said, it looks like you're really good at it. Can you help us? And I did. And someone said, hey, maybe you could teach actually sell classes on it. I'm like, really? Do people sell courses online? I didn't know that. I said in 2009. And said, okay, I guess I'll give it a try. So I started to sell a social media marketing class back in 2009, and gratefully was able to connect with several people who said, hey, maybe I could bring this to my audience. And it kind of went off and took off from there. And I started to test out various other aspects of marketing, sort of teaching it. And some worked and some didn't work. And I just did more of what worked. And I feel like that's essentially what most of us, maybe all of us, find our purpose, right? Our career purpose and our calling is we just have to try a lot of different things and notice what's really helpful to others and do more of that. And I feel like marketing, and that's kind of like the main message I want to share today in our conversation, is that I wish more of us saw marketing in that way. It's sort of like a way, like sometimes I say marketing is the act of a business finding its calling. It's the process of a business exploring and refining its purpose. Because without marketing, how do we do it? Do we just journal about what our purpose is? Do we have a really smart coach, who tells us or, has their own journaling process yeah, sure. All those can be helpful. Do we read a book? Do we go to a guru who tells us, oh, you should be doing this in life? All of that can be helpful. But here we are, soul family. Like, I think we all believe in the power of testing, experimenting, right? Testing the market. And there's that old Venn diagram of, I think now it's like fancy, like four circles, ikigai, but it's the idea of your passion versus what the market wants. It's like, can we bring the two together? Because if we can, sweet spot, right? So that's kind of the marketing, the authentic marketing idea essentially is, I think we all believe that is, can we experiment? Can we explore? And of course, if we do explore, are we brave enough to explore with our authenticity? And if we do, are we patient enough to wait? Are we patient enough to wait for those who really resonate with our energy signature to raise their hand and say, hey, I see you and I get you, So in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. I feel like, like you can say things like energy signature and, like that's kind of our language. Well, I'm going to take you back because I think, it's interesting because you kind of forget what it is to launch your first program sometimes when you're like on your 20th or 21st. But can you take us back to like your first program and how that, when you got it out there, like what you're going through and how that actually changed you? And when you started to work with people, I'm kind of curious what impact that had on you when you got it out there.
Well, it was a surprise, right? That people would pay for it. I think that was the first reaction. It's like, because I was first surprised that my friend even said that I should charge for it. Like, I just thought I'd do this for friends. But then when, I said, okay, let me try it out. Gratefully, I come from an entrepreneurial family, so I didn't mind trying to sell something. But of course, as we all have the experience of selling, the first unit that we sell, the first 10 units we sell of something, we're like, wow, this might actually work. And then with trepidation, actually delivering the product to see if it actually helps people is also quite vulnerable, and it takes, courage and willingness to make mistakes in the delivery of it. Gratefully, if we are on the right track, we find that people are saying, wow, that was helpful. And maybe they have questions, or maybe they have requests to say, well, can you also teach this part of it, or that thing, that related thing? And actually, then what I did was, when someone said, hey, can you teach this other related thing? I said, I'm not sure. I'm going to offer it as a bonus, as a free bonus. And then I tried teaching, and they said, oh yeah, that's really good too. Oh, maybe this can become its own thing. So that's kind of my first experiences of offering the program. And essentially, I'm so grateful. I think we all have somebody who is a peer or a colleague or an influencer who says, let me bring you to my audience. Like we eventually find somebody like that. And that's not necessarily someone who has a huge audience, but even just a peer, a colleague who says, hey, let me introduce you to my network. And that moment of, wow, someone actually believes in me enough to bring me to their audience is such a significant milestone in our journey, to say there's something here that matters to other people, not just myself. So I always remember, the first couple of people who brought me to their audience, and, forever grateful, right? Because that's how the sort of joint ventures is how we learned it back then. I don't know if that's still the language these days, JV or whatever, but yes, I think these days it's more influencers, right? Influencer marketing or whatever. But yeah, I still remember back in those days, like, wow, that was such an important thing to do,
I love what you said about not being sure if people would buy it. I relate a lot to that, because I started out in our industry managing joint ventures actually in 2012 or 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then for the next 2 or 3 years, I spent doing Facebook ads for people. Now, both of those skills are extremely marketable, very easy to sell. But what I started to notice was the reason that these ads are working is because I'm telling stories in the ad. And I did the actual market research from the people who bought these $10,000 programs to find out why they bought. And it was always the story. 9 times out of 10, it was. So I started thinking, I'm selling people short if I don't teach storytelling. However, I don't think anyone's going to want to buy it. Like, of course they want to buy services. Everybody wants everyone to do it for them. But I wasn't sure if I could teach courses on storytelling. And I found out I could. But I also imagine if you are working with people similar to the people we work with, and I think that you probably do, then a lot of times I find that those people are selling things that they don't think are sellable. And I'm curious if that's true for a lot of people you work with. And if so, how do you support them to do it anyways?
Yeah. No, it's a really great question. And it comes back to that, that Venn diagram of like, I have a healing modality. I really believe in it. Or I've had this peak experience and I want to teach the world about it, right? Okay. Does the world want to hear about your peak experience? Or does the world believe in you enough to want to be healed by you, or to learn from you, or to, go through your transformational process that you brilliantly created, right? My angle on that, I really think that there are multiple ways of getting to that sweet spot, that Venn diagram. My angle is that it depends on how quickly they need to sell something, right? Like I recently came up with this quadrant, which I'm hoping the SEO will work. If you Google authentic business quadrants, hopefully it'll come up. I haven't actually Googled it and see if it comes up, but it's one of my recent blog posts. Anyway, there's this idea in this quadrants where, and you can just imagine in your mind, it's thankfully not too hard to imagine, these four squares, right? And these two axes. And let me see if I can get this right. This would be called the y-axis, anyway, the horizontal axis. I'll just say, going from left to right, on the left, you have small audience or small warm audience. And then all the way to the right end of the spectrum, you have large warm audience, meaning, a large warm audience you have a lot of people, whether it's on an email list or social media, who pay attention to your content and your offerings. They believe in you. I mean, this is true now for you guys, right? Like a lot of people pay attention to what you share, what you teach, and therefore having their attention means you are able to sell something and have a lot of people consider it. So we got this on the one hand, the small warm audience, on the right hand, the large warm audience. That's the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is on the bottom is selling what they want, what your audience wants. That's the bottom end of the spectrum. And then on the top end of the spectrum is selling what you want, what you care about. Now, sometimes in some cases, it's the same. It's, relatively rare cases, like what I'm passionate about, people love to buy. My God, that's amazing. But like you said, Kylie, a lot of times, especially with like spiritual stuff or holistic stuff, it's sometimes it's not the same. So I tell people, listen, you've got these four quadrants now, right? Like you've got on the bottom left is usually, if you need money, you got to start on the bottom left, right? Because you have a small, warm audience. You have your family and friends. You have some colleagues and classmates. Now, maybe you have 300 Facebook friends, or maybe you have 5,000 Facebook friends, but you only know 300 of them, actually, right? Or 500 of them, whatever. So you start on the bottom left where you're like, I need to make money. I want to make money. So I have a small, warm audience right now. And if I want to make money, I've got to sell what they want to buy. So let's say that I am ADHD. I love helping people with ADHD, especially women with ADHD issues. Okay, well, that's your passion. Great, you love that. But what do they want to buy? So maybe you end up talking to your friends and your colleagues, and you ask them, hey, I've got all these skills, right? And I tell people this, like, listen, have you had this conversation with your friends and your colleagues, people who pay you their attention? Have you had this conversation where you make a list of all your skills, right? All the things that you possibly could monetize. And have you talked to your friends and say, can you do me a favor, just 15 minutes on Zoom, right? Half hour. Can you look at this list of bullet points and tell me, out of all these bullet points, is there like one or two that immediately pop up at you and go, I know someone exactly who needs that. Like I could refer you business today if you sold that bullet point. And people go, no, I've never had this conversation. I'm like, please go do that, because you may have to think outside the box. So if I went back to the ADHD women coaching example, right? They talk to their friends and then they're like, the friend goes, yeah, I don't know about ADHD coaching. Because a lot of people maybe haven't got diagnosed with it, but they have those characteristics. But what I do know is that I've been trying to write a book forever, and I haven't yet written one. And I feel like every time I try to write it, I get distracted. I have all these issues. And then the ADHD woman coach goes, oh my gosh, I could totally apply my skill set to that. I just never even thought of it, right? I just never even considered it. And then someone else might say, oh, at work, I have a really hard time speaking up in meetings because I am shy about this, or I'm feeling like no one will listen to me. Oh my gosh, as a coach, I could totally coach you through that. I never thought of doing that, right? And so that's the lower left quadrant, is selling what they want, still based on your skills, Now, it might have been exactly what you had got trained in doing, but it's like, oh, I could totally apply it anyway. So that's kind of where we start wanting to make money. If we're not needing to make money right away, you could start in the top left quadrant. You have a small audience, but you could start to kind of talk about what you're passionate about, right? Maybe you came up with some kind of healing modality, or you kind of are patching together all these different like tools into some cool framework about how humans transform, right? Then you could start there. It's like, I'm not in a hurry. I'm grateful. I have some savings, or I have, my life partner is making the money right now, and I could just take a couple years to figure this thing out. Great. Wonderful. Guess what? You can, work with, Conscious Marketer. You can work with you guys to build up an audience, over the next 3 years, Facebook ads, joint ventures, or whatever it is, content, storytelling, to build up an audience where in 1, 2, 3 years, or maybe in 3 to 6 months, who knows how quickly these things can happen, you now have a large enough warm audience. Now you have like thousands of people who follow you on social media or who are on your email newsletter who like your stories. And throughout all your stories, obviously you've been putting in there your transformational modality. You've been essentially making the case for 3 months or 3 years about why this transformational process is so powerful, right? And now that you have an audience, of course, you can launch your program. Again, they can work with you guys to launch a program where it's like, well, now I've got 3,000 people who are willing to consider this group program or course or one-on-one program that I'm so passionate to deliver. And you might not get 3,000 sales at the very first thing you launch, but you probably get 30, 90, 120 people who sign up.
Well, I love everything you're saying. One of the things sometimes we say to those that we work with is, kind of be more specific, and it's like taking it down from 25,000 feet down to 5,000 or lower. Right. And the easiest, I've heard this said a few times. I'm not exactly sure the source, but I believe that you don't really need to get an MBA, but if you just ask people what they want or what problems they need solved, and then kind of match it to whatever your magic is, then you can do pretty well in life and business. You can overcomplicate things a lot.
Richard, you're embarrassing me because I do have an MBA and I didn't even learn that. It's like,
I have an MBA, but I have about 3 primary lessons, and you could trade them in. Right. Obviously, I have a network there, but it's super funny. So,
yeah.
Well, I think that marketing, I think you've said this. It's people see it as a means to an end. I would say that it's kind of like kryptonite to like heart and conscious people, and they kind of see it in this negative light. And in some ways, Conscious Marketer, Kylie and I, like our target market is people who hate marketing in some ways, because because they've been, it's been misused with wrong intentions for so long that it's hard to figure out a way to do it differently. And so I'm kind of curious how you view marketing and how you work with, people who want to get their authentic work in the world to help them to reframe it so that it isn't like this evil thing that's ruining the world,
Any tool that has great power can be used for, with bad intentions or bad effect, right? Whether we're talking about money or marketing or even physical strength, right? Or just somebody who is brilliant at in any field, right? So here's dear spiritual teachers, I want to say, okay, dear spiritual teachers, your marketing makes more impact in the world than your quote unquote real client work. Let me start with that statement, because you say, well, how can that be? I am just going to let, the marketers do their thing. I'll let Richard and Kylie do their thing so that I can do my real work of deep healing, transformation, facilitation through, people's issues and bringing them to the other side. And my point of view on this is that you've already started doing that with your very first marketing message. The transformation has already begun. Now, the question is, do you understand that that's what's happening? That the moment someone comes into your sphere, the very first social media post they see from you, the first email they receive from you, the first video they watch, the first podcast they listen to, the first few words they hear out of your mouth already places a seed of energy that then expands the more they, sit at your feet, essentially, right? Whether it's through a podcast or video or social media or newsletter or something. So, and, as you guys well know, the more viral a marketing campaign goes, the more successful, quote unquote, a marketing campaign is, the more impact it makes, and yet the smaller the conversion rate, percentage-wise. Let me explain. You send an email to 100 of your closest friends or truest fans. You send an email to 100 truest fans. You expect that, and it's an email that sells them something or even asks them to click on something. You expect a high number of them to click on it, or a high number, maybe 10 out of the 100 will buy your program. 10% conversion out of 100 truest fans, right? Let's say you make a video or you make a podcast or you write an article that goes viral. It just gets shared, and now 100,000 people have read the article or listened to that episode or watched the video. Do you still expect a 10% conversion rate? No, you don't expect 10,000 of those 100,000 people to inquire with you and work with you. Now, does that mean that it's a failed campaign? No, it's a highly successful piece of content or campaign because people loved sharing it, loved the impact it made on them. That's why they shared it. Now now you've planted the seed in 100,000 souls. Now, the conversion rate, I don't know who's going to, not even 1%, maybe, but it's going to be higher than 10 people. You send an email to 100 people, 10 of them bought. A thing gets seen by 100,000 people. What, 500 people bought? That's way more than 10 people. That's only 0.5% conversion rate. The problem, I think, that I've seen in marketing is we care only about that 0.5%. Like, we just are trying to get those however many people it reaches. We just care about the 0.5% or 1% or 2% or 3% conversion rate. We just want to get people to that 0.5%. And as a result, and I've done the same thing. If I care so much about that 1% conversion or whatever, what about the 99% who still saw the marketing campaign? Do we understand the ripple effect that they make from seeing our marketing message? Now, as a storyteller, you well know that there's an impact there. And so I urge all of us, all of you spiritual teachers, to understand that your teaching begins with your marketing and your values. Also, the embodiment of your values happens with your marketing campaigns too. Well, which is why you're here at Conscious Marketer, right? It's like, yes, of course, I want to market consciously and not just teach consciously. I want to market consciously too. So that's why I say authentic or conscious marketing to me is sort of like these two sides. There's marketing as ministry. I say that. I said, my marketing is my ministry. I minister, I touch more people with my marketing than I do who end up signing up with me as a student or a client. For sure. Many people in my audience may never buy from me, actually. But I hear from them. In fact, I literally have seen some people comment on my stuff for years, and I know they're not a customer because I know who they are now. But I also know that they're sharing my stuff like left and right. And I also know that some of the people they share it with become my cousin. Anyway, but there are lots of people who may never comment, but who are their day is changed when they hear your podcast episode or see your video or read your Facebook post. Their day is changed. So on the one hand, marketing is ministry. Like, you just have to know that. Like, the email you send, the Instagram post you put up there is making a difference in probably a lot of people's day that you don't even realize is happening. And karma is being developed as a result of that. And then on the other hand, marketing is exploration of our calling and purpose. Like, I see these two as having simultaneously. It's like whenever I do a marketing campaign or post a piece of content, I am exploring myself to say, well, what do I believe about this today? Or what is real for me and live for me right now that is bubbling out and needs to be shared? Or how do I want to explore the connection with my audience today? This is exploration on the one hand, which is, we started talking about how marketing is a way of a business finding its calling, exploration. And on the other hand is ministry. And it's like, if we can do those two things and kind of like those two moves in our marketing, then I think our marketing is authentic and conscious, so.
I love that. I want to backtrack to something that you said because it like hit me when you're talking about the conversion aspect of things, where the conversions, if you have 100 people versus 1,000,000 people versus 100,000, one of the places that I've seen that the most is in email open rates. So you might go from like 30, 40. When I'm working with a small list, open rates are like 40, 50%. Which is blows industry standards out of the water. Then you get that 100,000 person list, you'd be happy to get 10%. But at the same time, I worked with this guy named Brendan Kane, and he wrote a book called 1 Million Followers. It's an amazing book. He had clients like Rihanna, Katie Couric, Yahoo. He's super smart, nerdy smart. And he did some really brilliant out of the box things in internet marketing. And one thing that he told me was he went up to a publisher and he said, if I can get 1 million followers on Instagram and Facebook in 30 days, would you publish a book about it? And they said, yeah, of course. So then he went out and he did it. And what he told me was, he said, Kylie, a lot of people think if you have 1 million followers, then you're going to sell to them. And it's just not true. But his whole theory was, instead of the 1,000 true fans, which is like you get those 1,000 people and you really nurture them and you really connect, his theory was like get 1 million and then pare it down to find those 100, 1,000 true fans, which I thought was really smart. But just like so many things that I've seen in our industry, like people say that doesn't work and that doesn't work and that doesn't work. And I'm like, it doesn't work for a solopreneur because you just don't have that many tentacles, But it could work for an agency. It could work for an 8-figure company because they have the team power. So small companies and solopreneurs are not going to be able to use the same strategies as larger companies. That's been my experience. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that so much and it's so funny because I kind of started my career in 2009 talking about this very dynamic in terms of social media, because I was saying, listen, a lot of the stuff you're being taught on social media is taught by people who were in corporate, and maybe they were successful in social media or marketing in corporate. And now they're trying to teach you how to do this stuff, but that's not how us, individuals, solopreneurs, which back then I was teaching much more the individual connection model rather than like trying to get tons and tons of fans. And of course, the individual connection model works really, really well on social media if you kind of look at it that way, instead of like trying to pretend you have 1 million followers when you don't, right, already. But yeah, I totally love that. I do want to say, for the solopreneur who's listening, like if you were to follow that model of getting 1 million followers in 30 days, you are going to be overwhelmed and exhausted, and probably you might even want to throw in the towel and go, I can't, there's no way I can handle this, because imagine all the direct messages you're going to get and all the emails you're going to get. So I just want to say, for those who are willing to take that path, more power to you. For those of us who don't mind taking a more gradual path, that's okay too. because here's what I've noticed about my own audience growth. I am proud to say that my email inbox gets down to 0 several times a week. Now, I know some of you listen like, really? I have 85,000 emails in my inbox. That's not possible to get down to 0. Well, one of the things I teach and I love talking to my clients about is I call it joyful productivity, which is this whole suite of skills and tools to kind of make our life and our business much more effective, efficient, and balanced. And one of the things I teach is inbox 0. I'm not the one who started that. I think Merlin Mann back in the early days, but I've been teaching that for a while, and I practice it myself. And I've noticed year by year, gratefully, I've been able to keep the inbox 0 and when I say inbox, I mean, I've responded to all my Facebook messages, my direct, Instagram DMs, my, YouTube comments, Facebook, I've responded to all that several times a week. It's at 0. And this is the joy of building an audience gradually. I started being very dedicated to consistent content, authentic content consistently back in 2014. Well, really 2015. Anyway, since then, it's an interesting thing, right? I used to have to launch, quote unquote, all the time, my services, programs, things to be able to get enough sales, like really hardcore launch, get lots of JV partners and all that stuff, or at least a couple. In 2015, I dedicated myself to content marketing, authentic content. Okay. And I noticed by the end of 2016, so I started in the middle of 2015 that I started doing it. And then basically in about a year and a half, within a year and a half, I noticed, oh my gosh, I haven't had to email out to people, hey, I'm available for my services. I've got room and, I've had a waiting list in a year and a half. I started having a waiting list, which is great. Now, small waiting list at that point, but then it's just grown gradually over the past years from 2016, the waiting list has grown since then, very gradually. Obviously, there's always drop off and there's ads, but it's grown gradually. And my audience has also grown gradually. Back then, 2015, I had 3,000 Facebook fans, and I built the first 3,000 fans in a very much more, I would say, an authentic way, meaning it's like just get whatever people can like my page kind of thing. And then since 2015, I've kind of gradually grown, and now we're recording this in 2022. It's almost at 9,000. There's been gradual growth over the last 7 years, and I'm grateful for it because number one, not only I've had a waiting list since then, but number two, I've been able to keep inbox 0 since then. It's like my life has been quite peaceful all along the way. And so I just want to share that as a model, as another way of doing it. It's like we don't all have to become successful or famous overnight, because that has its challenges. It has its benefits, but it also has its challenges. And some of us can take the more gradual model of, hey, we can grow gradually over, not overnight, sorry, over a decade, right? Or over 5 years. It's like, wow, the gradual growth has been very sustainable, and along the way, I've also grown my skills, and my confidence, and my programs, and my framework has become more and more sophisticated over those years. And now I'm grateful. I remember actually launching, and this may be going back to your earlier question, Richard. I remember launching a program in 2014. Before I started the content, I launched a program. I created this framework, like the business. This is the business framework, and please, you trust me. You're gonna love this. You're gonna work through, and you're gonna have a great business. I launched it. Nobody bought. Not one. And 2014, I wasn't a newbie anymore. I was already 5 years into my business, right? Nobody bought and I realized at that point, oh my gosh, I don't really have an audience. I have an audience that I borrowed from some JV partners, not borrowed, meaning they opted in for various webinars and things, but I don't really have a true fan audience, because I launched this passionate thing and nobody bought. Eventually, I think one person bought, and I refunded her because I'm like, this is not a good program.
I think we've all had those experiences, and it's interesting because in our own business, I'll share that, for many years we've run an agency, and so we're kind of a couple steps away from like the end, especially the end customer who's buying the products. And so when we, a couple of years ago started to shift into selling our training programs, we were like, shoot, we don't have an audience either. We've got to like develop our audience, and we knew they were out there. And so it's, I actually just purchased your audiobook on authentic marketing there. And it's read by George too. So George has such a soothing voice. So like this authentic content marketing where you're showing up on an ongoing basis to serve people. And I love this concept of marketing as ministry. I think also we could create a ministry of marketing as well. Like that's like we could create a little division. And I want to kind of end by asking you maybe a final question, because I think that you were explaining the two aspects of the marketing as ministry, and how I frame that as everything you put out changes consciousness. So you might as well put stuff out there that's helping people and improving lives and inspiring others. But there's this other part that it might have to be another podcast later, but there's this other part is like when you actually get on video, when you have to teach others, when you create the program, it changes you. It's like the ultimate personal development method. And I know you've shared some stuff about this. Can you just maybe give us an overview of how, when you start to market, when you start to get in front of the camera, when you start to create things, get it in the world, it literally like, it's better than any self-help book or going and sitting at a guru's feet with incense or, can you talk a little bit about that?
You can have incense too when you get on video. It's okay. I love your just brilliant, simple framing of marketing changes consciousness. And it's brilliant because it changes the consciousness of the consumer of the marketing, but it also changes the consciousness of the marketer, creator. And yes, it's like, I think the movement we're trying to, or the transformational journey is from, this is about me. And this is a larger spiritual journey. This is about me and my message and, my self-consciousness, right? My self-doubt, the things I have to deal with. And eventually we we practice showing up until we realize it's something working through me. There's a larger movement here working through me. There's a message coming through me, and I have to, as much as possible, get out of my own way of self-consciousness and, I'm not good enough, and who's going to watch me, and who's going to listen to me, who's going to read this anyway, and to say, no, this has to be shared because it's calling me to come through. And I know I'm not a male model, but I'm gonna show up anyway. Yes, I probably should do more podcasts. I have a face for podcasts, and so yes. But so the funny thing about the whole video thing, right? Let me tell you about my journey there. I made my first video in 2010. Shortly after I started my business, I'm like, oh, video's the future. I made my first video in 2010. I watched that video and I said, I'm never making another video ever again. I couldn't believe that's how I look on video. That's how I sound. It's like any of us who have ever, when we were young.
I can't even, you're a better man than me. I can't even watch my own video. I'm like one of those, I don't, like if I have to keep watching my videos, I'll never do another video too. So I'm like the, fight, flight, or flee. I'm like the flea. I record a video and then I don't watch it because I have to watch that.
Well, you're in good company because Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince, never watched his shows. He would do shows and never watch them. That was his rule. So There's something there about that. But yeah, I couldn't stand how I looked on camera and sounded voice. So I didn't make another video until 2014 when my dear friend Tad Hargrave, you all might connect with him too, marketingforhippies.com. He interviewed me on video just for his clients, I think. And he was so supportive and said, no, George, just go ahead and let's do this. So supportive. The clients were so supportive. And that made me kind of start to come out of my shell a little bit and go, maybe I can do this. And so I want to encourage all of you, if you are shy about whether it's video or audio or even writing, you should, get together with a small group of friends and start a secret Facebook group, for example, and say, can we support each other in getting out of our shell, and just post in this group, try Facebook Live in that group or whatever, knowing that the only comments we're going to receive, that, here's our pact to each other. We're only going to be supportive to each other here. We're not going to, unless we ask for constructive criticism, we're only going to say, hey, Richard, love that you started by saying this, and I really like your energy today, whatever. We're all going to say those things. All right. And by doing that, we get the practice of showing up on video or whatever. And so I started practicing in 2014, and more in 2015, especially. I started doing one video a day. I said, I'm going to do 100 videos. I'm going to just do a video a day, and I'm going to publish it in this Facebook group. It was still a public group, so it wasn't that, but not that many people were in it. So I started publishing a video a day. And by the, 30th video, 50th video, I had basically overcome my self-consciousness. And I didn't mind watching my videos at that point and kind of critiquing myself a bit and trying to find better ways of doing it. So of course, by video 100, I was quite confident and, have come out of my shell by that point. And also alongside the video, I said, well, when I made my first video, I'm like, who's going to watch? No one's going to watch me. So maybe let me just quickly on my little phone, tap out what I basically said. Because at that point, I had a writer's block too. I hated writing. Our family came to this country when I had just finished first grade in Taiwan. And now I'm in a new country, learning a new language. And I was very self-conscious. And in fact, I was bullied, when I was young, because I couldn't communicate English. And so I always have had a difficulty communicating growing up, both writing and speaking. And so when I made my 100-day video challenge, I just didn't know I was also starting a 100-day writing challenge, because I was like, no one's going to watch me. So let me just tap a few notes, basically bullet points of what I said. And then, by video 10, not only was I doing bullet points, I was basically writing more prose, right? And I was doing this like, okay, I had to post my video today. But I promised I would just tap out a few words. So I was sometimes doing it like 11:50 p.m. Like, okay, almost midnight. Gotta tap out the few words and post it to my group. By video 100, I had written 100. Didn't know this. I had written 100 blog posts. I didn't give myself any word limits. It doesn't matter if it was 50 words or 1,000 words. I'm just going to tap out a few things on my phone. It was very the phone also is a smaller blank screen than.
Well, you laptop. Probably through these things, you became you became a different person, and so this is the person.
Just like you said, consciousness changed. Basically, by that point, after the 100 videos, I was like, there's a message that needs to come out, and no matter how. Here's the thing, no matter how I felt that day, when I was doing a daily challenge, no matter how I felt that day, I was going to make it. And to all of you aspiring video makers, okay, and creators, content creators, let me say this. I never feel like it when I press record. Or I should say this. I always feel like I can prepare more. By the time I press record, I'm like, so I had to give myself a time limit. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a video right now. And so now all I do is Facebook Lives. Because I know that if I pre-record, I could do 3 takes, 5 takes, 12 takes and still not be satisfied. So then by the time I press go live, I know I could still prepare more, but I know the dynamic by now. I press go live, I let my mouth open and say, well, today I'm going to talk about blah, blah, blah. And basically after about 3 to 5 minutes, I've gotten into it.
Well, I think there's some really amazing. You should go back and listen to this podcast twice, because there's a lot of embedded wisdom here. But I think you've just landed a few nuggets, and I just want to highlight them because they're so important. One is you never feel ready to get on video, but you do it anyway, and then it comes through you. And so there's something very powerful about having the courage to do that. And there's something very powerful about it becomes less about you and your lower self, and you're doing it for the service of others. And the other thing I want to highlight that I think is important that might be missed is, the idea of a challenge is you're in a group field that's pulling you through. And also you had mentioned get around a group of friends, or for me, I think you can go hire George as a mentor, or come work with us, or go find somebody else. But you by yourself, don't have you may not have the energy field to pull it off. And so that's why, but as soon as you make the commitment to join somebody else, and you're a business coach, this is what you do. You help people raise their level because you kind of have to supplement somebody. But the interesting thing is if you realize that's how it works, then you just have to find the right field to join. And then that energy will carry you along and your chance for success. And then you don't need that group anymore. You don't need the program or whoever you're working with, because
that's why you guys have a group, right? You guys have the accelerator and your group programs that creates that field. Yeah, exactly.
And that wasn't a pitch for our group, but any group or any coach is doing it by yourself. Really, it's just a lot harder. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just, if you want to accelerate, I think getting into a field that can support whatever
if
you
it's
want to do,
available,
and then you can serve more people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just quick thing. You said it comes through you, and I just on that last point, like at first we practice getting out of our way or being vulnerable. It's okay, and being not ready, quote unquote. It's okay, and just the exposure of that feeling and pressing record anyway. And after a while, we realize, oh, something is coming through me. That's the first coming through you, and then as you keep doing it again and again and again and again and again, and get the content out there and collaborations and maybe using ads to deliver the content out there, eventually, guess what? You realize you're now the head of, or the representative of a movement, of a message. Like at this point, I feel like I'm responsible, quote unquote, for authentic business now. Like it's not just about me anymore. Really, it's like a lot of people look up to me and go, George, if you embarrass us, right? Or if you do something that embarrasses this idea of authentic business, right? Like I have a responsibility now. Like no, literally it's not about me anymore because I represent people who believe in this idea. And that's what happens with teachers too. Yeah.
Well, this has been a really wonderful episode. And if people want to learn more about your work, you have a website, and it's
here's this will help with my SEO. Google my name, Google my name, and you'll find all my links there. I mean, thankfully, George Kao, Kao last name, and however you want to follow
.com, and you have an Instagram, you have a website. You can also search them on Amazon, and in the show notes, if you're interested in getting the show notes and all the links, you can also go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast, and George's podcast will be listed there. Thanks so much, George, for spending time with us today. It's been a real pleasure. This is such a flowy conversation. I really love the work you're doing and the movement that you're behind.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kylie, for bringing me here. It's so wonderful to connect with both of you. So looking forward to more.
Thank you, George.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, please go leave a review. And we greatly appreciate you being part of the Conscious Marketer podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.